well, hello all, and today we have a special edition of the Risking It All podcast. We have now complete a year of recording this podcast together, and we thought it'd be good just to do a wee episode reviewing how our first year in podcasting has went. We're missing a co-host today. Mr. McDade couldn't make it, so you're stuck with the B team, myself and Barry, for Jolly Media Marketing. So we're just going to have a bit of a blather about why we get into podcasting in the first place, how we've found year one, what we've enjoyed about it, what we've maybe found to be really challenging, and then we'll talk to you a bit about the future plans for the podcast moving into next year. So I'll maybe pass over to Barry on this one to get us going, mate. Cast your mind back to whatever it was when this first idea of getting a podcast going was floated. Can you remember why we ended up sat around a table with random guests and lights in a studio? Like, where did the idea initiate?
I'm struggling to remember last week at this rate with the way this year's went, but I can't believe we're nearly a year in is the biggest thing for me, you know, sitting here doing a yearly recap. I'm like, that's flown by, you know. I know that's a pure cliche, but it really, really has.
Aye.
How did we get into podcasting? I feel like I just kind of fell into it because you and Andy came up with an idea, if I'm being honest. So I'll tell you my remembrance of it, and you can let me know if I'm far off the mark. But I remember probably this time last year, you and Andy kind of had that conversation, said, why don't we get into podcasting? I think it'll be good fun. Brought that to my table, and as normal, I'm very, very easily persuaded with any half-decent sales pitch. So the minute I heard about it, I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I'll get your opinion of that in a second. But my expectations probably of podcasting, why I get into it, I had very little expectation. My main goal was obviously, my working week at that point was just 100% Jolly Media Marketing. You know, half the time I barely pop my head over my computer screen to do anything else. So my primary initial objective was to actually take some time out for the business, to spend in something a bit fun, you know, enjoy myself. And also to kind of put myself out there a wee bit, build my confidence. I can categorically say up to this point, I hadn't sat in a podcast studio up to January this year. It was very, very new to me when, you know, I couldn't have been any newer to it. So there was an element of me enjoying myself, speaking to people. I always enjoy speaking to people. You know, you guys in the office know that, because every time I go on a call, the whole place shuts down because I can't stop talking. So I just wanted to get into podcasting to do something a bit fun, enjoy myself, and spend a bit of time away from my computer. Very little objectives apart from that. Obviously, once you get started, things change, but that was probably how I get into it.
Aye, and I think the stage before that, in terms of like me and Andy having a conversation about it, like if I cast my mind back to where I was at that point, probably still working full time, in my kind of 9 to 5, helping you on the side. So we're starting to just absorb kind of more and more content around stepping into business full time, learning for others, finding wee shortcuts. And a large part of that was listening to more and more podcasts. Andy was the same in the sense that he's always really loved a podcast, you know, taking the dog a walk, get the AirPods in, even doing Danny's chores in the house, he's always got his AirPods in, just listening to nonsense, really. Yeah. So it was honestly, mate, we were at I can't quite remember where we were. It was either a family event or we were away on a holiday together with respective families, and after a few drinks just said, we should do a podcast, by the way. I think that'd be fun. And initially thought, I can't do a fucking podcast. What do I know about podcasting? Like, I enjoy listening to them, but I don't have a clue. And then when I made that leap, quit my job, joined you at Jolly Media Marketing full time, I almost had that like wee realisation that from a building audience perspective, like I was almost, or building a network, I was just starting from scratch. Like my network up until that point was made up of people that I had worked with in contact centres over the last 15 years, but they really weren't the people that I was going to be looking to sell our products or services to. So I thought, actually, from a personal brand perspective, and as you say, it'll just be something fun to do, this is maybe actually quite a good idea. So I remember me, you and Andy started to have conversations about it, and initially the plan was, we've got this new wee office, it's small and pokey, but we can find a wee corner, we'll buy all the kit, we'll set it up, it'll be good to go, we'll get ready to press play, and that'll be us. But there's so much more to it than you even realise. Even daft things like picking a name, getting a logo created, trying to figure out what your niche is. You know, how do you go about getting guests? All of which we'll cover the day. But same as you, really, like it's like anything else in life, really. You stumble across it, and the art of it is just staying disciplined and keeping at it, even at times where you think, oh, this is just too much, I just don't have the time, or you lose a wee bit of passion for it.
Yeah.
But that's ultimately how it came to be. I'd love to be sat here saying that, you know, we strategised it and we put up a 3-year plan in the board, and, you know, this is all part of creating a personal brand that means that it's you know, it's easier to grow our business. I had some of that in my head, but probably, you know, 10% in my driving reason behind wanting to do it. The other 90% was just, I think that'll be quite a fun thing to do.
Yeah. I think we were all aligned on that as well. And I remember when we first set out, so you were saying a bit like, you know, we were in the office, we had a wee get together and we started mapping it out. We thought we could do it ourselves. We quickly realised we couldn't, by the way. That was one of the first ideas to go, which is why we're here in the Glasgow podcast studio. But I remember when we were doing our research, like up until recently when we hit the number, my full goal with podcasting, I forgot about personal brand and I forgot about self-development, which has been a big win, by the way. We'll come on to that. But I remember just fixating over getting to 21 episodes.
Aye.
That was the thing I had in my head. Like, we researched it and we seen 1% of podcasts make it to 21. I was just fascinated by that. I couldn't get over that.
Aye, it's just, I think, like, even before that, I think when we looked at the numbers, it was 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 1.
Yeah.
Which again is just a staggering statistic, and I think about that loads. Like, why is that? Why do people throw the towel in so early? Part of it will be that it's harder than people realise.
Yeah.
I think it looks like, you know, on the face of it, a fun, easy thing to do, and it is fun, but it's definitely not easy, even with the support of a studio that have been in the game for a long, long time. And especially if you're running a business, or if you've got some form of like high flying career that you need to focus on, kind of 9 to 5, trying to sew it in to become part of your life is tough. And we'll talk about that today, how we've managed to do that. But I equally remember sat in the office going, we can pull this off. Like, let's just buy the kit. And then when you start looking into the kit that's required and starting to weigh up, you know, the quality output that you're looking for, it became quite apparent quite early on that there's probably more to it than we realise. So initially we were like, why don't we just go and see a studio? There's a couple about Glasgow, like, we'll go and see them, and if anything, it just validates that, you know, the right thing to do is to do it in our office, save ourselves a bit of cash. And the minute you walk into a studio like this, it's just like, you don't even need to talk to Cam and Mark, who are just incredible at what they do and have so much experience and willingness to help. It just blows you away, and you think, why would we ever try and replicate this ourselves? Like, A, it's time, B, it's cost, C, it's knowledge and understanding, all of which we probably didn't really have a whole abundance at the time.
No, definitely not. I think when we look into our scenario at the time, we were fortuitous enough to understand that, you know, we could possibly invest a bit of money to get a studio like this involved. Definitely the best decision we've ever done, because the way my mind works is when we were starting, we were looking into it, I was investigating it as if, what's the technical steps to do a podcast? You know, what do you need? You know, you need an audio file, you need a video file, you need an RSS feed, you need a YouTube, you need this, you need that. And I was just like, oh, okay, this is getting longer and longer by the second, right? But
even that, mate, right? So you've just said, you need an audio file and a video file. I didn't know that until we came in here, started recording, and then spoke to Cam. I'm not a technical guy, so I'm the ultimate layman's chap, I guess, when it comes to things like this. And I didn't realise that there was an audio file, a video file, both had to marry up. So I just, the studio blowing us away aside, I can safely say that if we would have set out to do this and attempted to do it on our own, I don't think we would have made episode 21, to be honest.
I don't think so either. And we had loads of, I'll speak for myself here, but you might have, there was a couple of aha moments earlier on. Like the funny one that I remember going, oh my God, is that why they do that? Is, you talked about the audio file and the video file having to get matched up. Mm-hmm. Remember the first time we sat here, and I think it was Cam at the time came over with the wee film thing about
snap action.
I think at first when I seen that, I was like, oh shit, we're in trouble now, man. This is serious.
I thought that was a thing to cue actors to go, right, we're ready now, shut up, stop making small talk.
So I asked Cam about this, and it turns out that's to make a noise where you can match the audio and the video file together.
Aye.
So simple things like that, like as an inexperienced podcaster, just blew my mind. I was like, wow, that's amazing. But yeah, the technical skills required to do a podcast at a certain production level is high. I think if anybody's listening to this thinking, right, this is sounding too scary for me, I'm not going to do my podcast. Mm-hmm. I would, yes, it's challenging to do it at that, but ultimately, you don't need to start off by doing a video podcast.
Aye.
You can sit with your phone, start chatting to people and bang it out there at the start. There's different ways to get tore into it.
And also, like, if you're desperate to do it, right, and we'll talk about the sequence that we go through every couple of weeks now to record one, get it out into the abyss, do some promotion around it, and all the sequenced actions that are required to keep this thing alive. But if you hear that and think, oh God, I'd love to do it, I just A, don't have the time, or B, don't have some of that technical skill, there's always somebody that will do it for you for a bit of cash.
Yeah.
Whether that's the studio that we're sat in the day, whether that's somebody that you find on Fiverr or Upwork. It's like anything else in life or in business. If you want to do it and you're passionate enough about it, you'll figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah.
So don't be sat thinking, oh God, that it's the fountain of doom here. Like I really wanted to get a podcast going, but hearing that, I've no chance. It is tricky. The thing I find trickiest, to be honest, is just finding the time to keep it all motoring and going in a proactive way rather than just kind of firefighting. But again, we've even pivoted, our recording schedule to try and give a wee bit more room to breathe so that you can actually keep it alive and keep it moving. So let's move into that then, right? For those that are listening that have an interest, and we'll talk everybody through the kind of sequence that we follow or followed at the start of the year, which we've now changed, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail to actually get a podcast out into the world so that folk can start to listen and watch it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the start of the year then. So again, having this get to 21 episodes go in our head, we started off recording the Risking It All podcast every single Tuesday. So 4 guests a month, that in itself was a challenge at the start. Thankfully, what we found, booking guests at the start, I don't know what your thoughts on with this, Brian, but when we started the podcast, I had a wee bit of an imposter syndrome. I know that for a fact because I thought, one, who wants to speak to me that doesn't know me? Right? Who's going to give me their time? Because people are busy. And 2, I was like, can I actually speak to people and make it engaging? I knew I could do it off camera because, my years as a consultant and I built up that skill. But on camera, I was like, can I do this? Mm-hmm. So that was probably in the back of my mind. But what I found at the start, which was really refreshing, is we got booked up pretty quickly.
Aye.
We actually just, at the start, if you ask people, they tended to say yes.
Aye.
Which, the more yeses you get, the more your confidence goes, the easier it is. So, I mean, when you're starting a podcast, I probably would say is, learn from me more than anyone and just don't be afraid to ask people to come on. You were definitely better at that than me. Mm-hmm. But our initial schedule would literally evolve around, book a guest, get them in a diary for Tuesday, come to the studio. The fortuitous position with the studio is that we literally just had to walk in and sit down and go. Obviously, if you're doing it yourself, you've got so much more layers to that. But you would sit and do an hour podcast every Tuesday. You'd leave that studio, and then the file would be sent over to you. So the audio file at the start, when we first started doing this, you would then listen to that and provide any edits. So for the first probably 5 or 6 episodes, I would say, thinking about it, is we listened to them religiously because we were still a bit, maybe not had the confidence in ourselves that they would sound good, and we were paying a bit more attention. If you remember at the start, we would listen to them.
The CEs would listen to it and critique it, and do we like that, and what do you think, should we edit that out? And
so that was adding on quite a bit of time. Ultimately, when we listened to the first, say, half a dozen, very little of it we changed anyway. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 that had to get cut out, but apart from that, but we also started off at the start, if you remember, we listened to them and we also noted down times to make shorts. Which was even harder, by the way. Because if you're listening to try and remove parts for the quality of the episode, but also listen to try and think about what's the best soundbite, it's actually really taxing mentally.
It is.
I found that really challenging.
Because you're trying to listen for a hook, almost. You're trying to listen out for something, like the first 3 seconds of a video and social or everything. So you're trying to listen with that in mind. It does become quite exhausting. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. I found myself having to listen to things multiple times. And I think even going back a step, we skimmed over it, but things like picking a name, things like picking a niche, getting a wee logo created, that's just about being creative. We just had a wee brainstorming session, me, you and Andy, got 4 or 5 names up on the whiteboard, did the whole pros and cons of both, had a look at domains, what's available, what's not available. Got a guy on Fiverr, I think it was, or Upwork, or one of these sites to do a wee logo for us. He sent a couple through, you go through them, right, tweak that, change that. And then in terms of your early guest booking, like when I cast our mind back to the first handful that we had on, it's all people that are within your own network. And that's good for a couple of reasons. The primary one is you're comfortable talking to them. You're not sat in front of a stranger. You know quite a lot about them. So you almost know what to try and draw out of them already because you've got an existing relationship with them. And then I think what we started to find, mate, was that because the production quality is so high and the studio looks so good, when you start to post them out and people start to see them, we actually got people then starting to write in to the social pages saying, can I come onto the podcast? Which I think we've all spoken about separately is it's quite an unreal feeling when you've got people reaching out to say, I want to come and sit with you. And these are highly successful, multi-7 and sometimes multi-8 figure entrepreneurs that are reaching out and asking to spend a bit of time on your podcast. That happened probably within 4 or 5 weeks is beginning. So again, that's another reason or something else that just validates that using the studio was the right thing to do, because guest booking, especially when you're doing a weekly podcast, it can be quite tricky. It's the one thing that you feel quite a bit of pressure on. We need to get guests secured. 4 a month doesn't sound like a lot, but it just is, especially when you're asking for in-person recordings in a studio. We can do it remotely and we have done them remotely, but I think we just prefer being face-to-face in the studio.
Definitely. That for me was probably one of the main driving factors to get into that 21 episodes without really struggling, is the minute that people reached out to us. Because at that point you think about your self-doubt around, are people going to actually want to talk to me? Then you've got somebody who doesn't know you. It's like wanting to come on the podcast. For me, I was blown away by that, really. That kind of gave me a wee bit of enthusiasm to keep going. But yeah, you're right though, but that weekly schedule, juggling, I mean, it is scheduling at the end of the day, juggling all these guests, getting them booked in, having yourself ultimately 6 days to listen to the audio files, pick out the shorts, then you're getting that back to the studio, they'll come back to you with the final version. And then at that point, we would upload it into the platforms. So Spotify, YouTube, we'd create thumbnails. So it took us probably 10 episodes to realise that our thumbnails weren't great, and we'd done them all again, if you remember that. And I think I'm going to do them again, actually. I said that the other day. But things like, from a uploading your podcast episode point of view, there is actual things that take quite a bit of time that I didn't foresee at the start. So I've mentioned about uploading the episodes, creating a thumbnail. You need to create a different thumbnail for YouTube and Spotify as well, because it's different dimensions. Writing a description, which ultimately, I don't even know if it's SEO optimized, or we don't know, we just kind of churned them out. But there is an art form to that as well. And then all the shorts, that was your bag, Brian, but a lot of the episodes had 3 or 4 shorts that had to go through the same process as what I've just explained. So you're probably 5 different bits of content for every episode that you're having to upload.
And if I could give anybody any advice on I guess the parts which I owned in particular around having a listen, creating shorts which you want to be as engaging as possible. I remember initially thinking, I should probably show these to the guests before I post them. But then all that happens is, ultimately the advice is just, it's your podcast. They've agreed to come on. They've recorded a session with you. That entire session is going onto the internet anyway. So actually picking a shot that just highlights a particular moment within that entire recording, you don't really need to engage. Just crack on. You're too busy. And I think when you're trying to establish an audience, with any new, whether it's a new business that you're starting, a new podcast that you're looking to get going, it's like anything else really, the more reps that you can put in initially, the better you'll get at it. And the quicker you'll get better at it, if you're doing it regularly. So although 1 week was really, really challenging because the turnaround time was it was relentless, it's non-stop, I wouldn't have changed that, because I think that it enforces that discipline on you, learning as you go. You get your mistakes out of the way early, and it just helps create an audience. When folk know that there's a new recording coming every single week, they're more likely to tune in. Ultimately and inevitably for us, it was too much, and we might revert back to that again in future, whenever we're in a more fortuitous position with resource within our own business. But it was just too it was too much to do. But also I felt like by having an hour within the studio, it felt like sometimes we were rushing the conversation with the guest.
Yeah, definitely.
We would get to the end and we'd be like, oh God, we're running out of time, we need to wrap this up. And you maybe weren't the full way through the conversation that you want to have with the guest, which never felt nice either.
No.
So I think, like, for context and for those that are listening and for those that are eagle-eyed and have spotted it, we've reverted to recording every second week now.
Yeah.
But we do that over a 2-hour period. So essentially over the course of a month, we still have the same recording time. We just have 2 hours with each guest that we have on every second week, and that buys us a bit more room to breathe, to get the episodes out and be a bit more proactive in terms of just keeping an eye on quality and all the different stuff that's required to really elevate your reach. But also just provides a wee bit more quality time with the guest, so that there's no rush in having the conversation.
Yeah, I think that was a good move for us as well, looking back on it, wasn't it? Going to 2, I think. And just kind of recapping all those, you could call them challenges that you need to navigate at the start, like the recording schedule, like uploading, like the clips. It started to become apparent why people don't make it to 21 episodes.
Aye.
When we were going through that, because, it is hard. If you remember, we done 2 things, just learning fair experience. We done 2 things probably after the 6 episodes, which saved us a shitload of time. One of them is we just stopped editing anything, really. We just cut the start, cut the end of the episode and put it out. So that, again, we weren't all listening to it all, and we just said to the studio, just cut the start, cut the end, send us a video, we're good. So having the confidence of having a few under our belt, we just went, right, fuck it, let's just get out there. So that was a good move. And the second one is we started using software for the shorts.
Aye.
So again, as a shortcut for anyone out there, look at things like Opus Clips is the one we use, but there's loads of them. Get your video, put it in, spits out 10, 12 shots and you just pick your favourites.
There is still a bit of editing required,
Yeah.
but it essentially, the thing that it's best at is highlighting to you potential shots that would perform well on social. You
Yeah.
still need to take them and, you know, do a bit of kind of post-production
Yeah.
stuff on them. It's not too laborious. We like a bit of dramatic music behind ours playing, which has become a bit of a calling card there, shots.
Yeah.
But that of course is optional. So it doesn't eliminate the entire task, but it definitely makes life easier.
Sped
it means
it
that
up.
you're not having to sit and listen to a full hour's podcast that you've already listened to earlier on that
Yeah.
week.
And the other thing as well, just thinking about it, you know, we're talking about possible barriers which would make you stop podcasting. Definitely the editing time and the uploading time. But the other thing I think where, in my humble opinion, where people stop podcasting for is when they fixate over the numbers of the podcast.
Aye.
So it's funny because we knew we were going to do a recap and we pulled up the numbers, and it was probably the first time we'd pulled up the numbers in 6 months.
Aye, maybe longer.
Maybe longer. And ultimately, right, if you're driven by getting thousands of views over having fun and speaking to people, and we'll come on to self-development shortly and learning, if you get into podcasts driven by numbers, you're likely going to fall into that 99% that don't make it to 21.
Aye.
Because, you know, ultimately we're not going to do this for 20 years and no start worrying about numbers at some point. Obviously that it's important, but ultimately when you start podcasting, you need to be prepared that you're not going to go viral, you're not going to have these crazy numbers. And, you know, if you fixate over, I just want to get monetized on YouTube and make all this money and get, you know, you're probably going to lose your enthusiasm with it.
Aye.
Which is a key thing for me.
I think unless you're going into it looking to start a podcast business, and that's your all day, every day, more often than not, or certainly the people within our networks that host or co-host podcasts, they do it to supplement an existing business.
Yeah.
If you're doing it to supplement an existing business, everything that you've just said is beyond spot on, really.
Yeah.
There's other non-cashable and I guess cashable benefits of having it in place. So just don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about downloads, streams, likes, shares, comments. And another bit of advice I would give, right, and this will be the last gloomy realisation that we share, and then we'll get into some of the positives, you know, what we've experienced since getting the podcast going, is that you need to have your eyes open to the fact, and it is a fact, right, that you're going to get the piss ripped out of you. Whether that's just random trolls that don't know you, that see a clip and comment calling you a fat bastard or a baldy bastard, a specky bastard, it is going to happen. I had them all, aye. There is no getting away from that. That's actually not it's not intuitive to podcasting. That's just one of the unfortunate kind of outputs, I guess, of putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Is that most folk are positive and encouraging, especially folk within your own wee kind of circle and network, but you will just get some arseholes that just don't have anything better to do with their time, that just nitpick and will comment on social posts in particular. It's rarely full episodes.
Yeah.
And just try and twist the knife a wee bit. And it's up to you what you do with them. You know, sometimes I like to have a wee bite back and a wee fight, but more often than not nowadays, too busy for it, ignore it and crack on to the next. So
yeah. I'm at ignore and crack on to the next guy. I know sometimes you like to get involved, but
do you know what does my head in? Is that these trolls in particular, they're fucking smart. So what they do is they'll make some sort of almost like they're offending you, right? But they do it in a tactful way. So rather than just saying something like "you are a fat bastard," they'll say something like, "God, you're only half bursting into their clothes." And then when you go back and go, "Who are you talking to, you fucking arsehole?" Like, they'll report you to the social channel. So they've kicked it off, you respond and fight back, and then they report you. And then you get a wee notification through saying yellow card. So if you're going to choose the have a dig back route like I do sometimes, just be careful and make sure you don't end up in bother with, you know, the channels that support your podcast extending its reach. But in summary, you're going to get some people that slag you off, sometimes to your face, sometimes behind your back, but ultimately just stand true to what you're trying to accomplish and forget all of that. You know, don't worry about it. Certainly don't let it hold you back. It's one of the best things that we've done, to be honest.
Definitely.
So that segues us in nicely into some of the great things that I guess have happened as a result of being in the podcast, or somebody seeing a clip, or somebody reaching out. So I'll maybe pass over to you first, mate. What's been some of the real positives and highlights as far as you're concerned?
There's been loads. I think, again, probably naively when I get into this, I didn't really think about what the benefits could be out with just building my own confidence and having a bit of fun. But looking back now, we've had, 30 guests on, 30 different stories. One of the biggest things for me has just been learning for all these people, you know. So as a podcast host, you're obviously guiding the conversation to get through the story. But what I found myself is I was just like a sponge in here, you know, like I was taking... I say to you, sometimes people listen to you, but when people listen to you attentively, that's kind of what you need to be as a podcast host. And I found that level of deep concentration when you're in this room, your phones are in the bag, on silent in airplane mode, and you're just having a conversation with someone. I found myself taking out so much benefit for that in regards to learning for their story and my own self-development. So that was something I did not think would happen, because I didn't think it wouldn't happen. I just hadn't thought of it. But what I've learned from speaking to 30 different business owners is, you know, one, it's gave me so much ideas for my own business or our own business. And two, the biggest thing probably is it's filled me with so much enthusiasm about our business as well, because no every story was rainbows.
Aye.
Fucking hell, man.
To say the least.
There was some highs and lows in there, and, you know, no matter how many roadblocks you hit in your own business, knowing that you've spoke to 30 other people that have had similar roadblocks, for me is just that was a massive benefit of doing this. And if anything, it's infused me about our own business, but also infused me about just keeping going with our own podcast. You know, one little nugget a week is more than enough, and we were getting loads every week.
Aye.
And just before I pass back over to you, the other thing which is completely related to that, again, naively at the start, as I said, I felt like, who's going to really want to talk to me? You know, these people are successful, they're, you know, wealthy, they've achieved loads. One of the biggest, maybe not the biggest surprise, one of the things I was really happy about was how nice they were.
Aye.
See the people that you didn't know, like, sometimes you see them on social media and you don't know them, and you think you have this maybe perception that they're something they're not. I can categorically say that everybody that we met for the first time in this podcast studio was absolutely brand new.
Aye.
Which was great as well, because, you know, you just relax and you can get a better conversation for it.
Aye, I couldn't agree more, mate. I think for me the real positives are, I'm often not great at listening. I'm a talker by nature. I'm probably riddled with ADHD, so I interrupt people a lot, just in my personal and business life. So for me, it's helped hopefully hone that skill, just as you say, listen intently and respond accordingly. And that just helps when there's no distraction. All you can really do is listen and try and not speak over the top of people. But then, just like as you say, some of the people that we've had on, like, they're just brilliant people. Like they're really successful, and, you know, success leaves clues and all that jazz. So it's been amazing to sit across the table for folk that have just been there and done that and learn from them. And, you know, the relationship doesn't end when the podcast ends. You know, we've got a bit of a wee kind of WhatsApp community going now, but even with that, you know, there's been a couple of occasions where I've been out socially with folk that have been on the podcast, and creating a network of 30 plus individuals that are doing remarkably well with their own business will have a cashable benefit of some sort at some point in the future. But that aside, it has just been really good to, like, sit across for other people that validate almost that actually you don't need to have all your shit together. I think sometimes people have this misinformed viewpoint that's really successful entrepreneurs are highly organised, they all set plans and forecasts and execute against them, and some do, but equally some are a riot in the same way that I'm a riot. sometimes, and other people in business are alright sometimes, and it's been quite warming to know that actually sometimes there's not a plan. It's just crack on, get the heat down, charge on with work. Know that there's no a plan, but it's like people just dilly through life and end up being presented with an opportunity, and they really go for it. So that's been quite encouraging. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's nobody that sat across from me where I've went, oh God, I could really never do that. Like, if anything, it just validates that I'm not hearing or seeing anything that I can't accomplish with just a wee bit more time and a wee bit more encouragement and being able to reach out to the right person. And some of the 30 people that we've met so far are the right people. So
Aye, definitely.
That, I think, what it does for your personal brand, you just can't attribute enough value to that. So I don't know what it is about the psychology behind it, but I even find myself that when I'm watching social clips of people that are on podcasts, my mind automatically jumps to they really know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. So, and then when I think about some of the just hard and fast cashable benefits, we've done business with a couple of people that have been on our podcast, and even people that have not been on the podcast, we've won business by people saying, I've seen some of your podcast clips. So it's dead hard, like, to attribute almost like the cashable benefits that you achieve directly to the podcast. Sometimes you get lurkers that watch it or watch clips of it and don't mention it, don't say anything, but that's potentially what's driving them in to have that initial conversation with you. For me, it just feels like one of these things that just needs to continue.
Yeah.
And the point that you made about don't worry too much about the numbers, I found myself in the first month or so in particular getting quite fixated.
Yeah, same.
By looking at the numbers. But I think you realise in time that you have minimal influence over that. You just need to continue to put in the reps, stay disciplined, keep at it. And eventually it will, in inverted commas, come good. But I kind of feel like it's already came good for us. So it's just like, I want more of that. I want to speak to another 30, 40, 50 really successful people and learn from them as much as I can, do business with them, and just continue to have a laugh and fun with them.
Aye, definitely. I think, that point about the numbers, it's about what do you see as a success for you when you get into this, know? And at first I was just like, get to 21 episodes, and then I realised, wait, there's a hell of a lot more to this, and that self-development thing, I'd like to think if any of our listeners take 5% away for guess of what I've taken, then it's been beneficial. So that's been a big one. So
having a think about our guests, right? I'll put you on the spot, and rather than asking you for a favourite, I'll maybe ask you to just reconcile your mind back to a few kind of favourite moments, even over the past year of the guests that we've spoken to. Where does your mind gravitate to?
Oh, man, there's been. I'm not gonna quite go full political and say everybody was great, but honestly, they weren't far off it. All the guests. I think thinking back to our early guests. Remember speaking to we had the gym guys on quite early. We had Paul Tallett, who's still a client, a great friend of ours. Loved Paul's episode because it was just don't mind me saying, Paul, but you're a bit of a maniac with all the stuff you do, to be honest. Ultra marathons, running a big clothing business, and Caroline's a big advocate of the podcast. I really enjoy it. I think that episode, I was like, that was the first time we'd met Paul. Quite early on. I was like, oh man, that was brilliant. Like, he's just sat down, brand new guy, emptied his full story, and it was really good fun. I think that was the first person, maybe, or one of the first people we spoke to that we didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, wow, this has got legs in it, really. Aye. And they became our first sponsor as well. So, massive thank you, Paul and Caroline. That was great. But, just to pick out a few, obviously we're quite ingrained in sort of local businesses in Glasgow, but I remember Ross, Brian's, Andy's coaching pal. Just remember getting him on. I was like, It made me realise that we don't really ask Andy much about the coach business, because when he came on, I was like, right, I'm going to ask him everything about the coach business. He was a cracking guest because we had a good laugh. And then more recently, you know, I'll pick a couple more and then pass over to you. More recently, people like, we had Jamie Taylor, who had his own podcast, Taylor Talks Trades. Really successful guy, but I had no idea about his backstory. That was the first time I heard the backstory, and I thought, wow, like, he's been through a lot.
Aye.
So that caught me off guard, but I got a lot for that one. And I'm not going to pick any more because I want to give you an opportunity to have a few. But all in all, mate, I think I didn't leave this studio once thinking, oh my God, I didn't enjoy that conversation.
Aye.
There was a wee bit of everything, but you know, just thinking off the top of my head, there's a few there for you.
Aye, and I think for me, again, casting my own mind back to some of the early guests that we had, like, I gravitate immediately to Scott Smith.
Yeah.
I've known Scott for a long time now. We worked together at British Gas, long-standing client, Jolly Media Marketing. Just a brilliant guy, him and his business partner, Imran. And I knew him when I was a complete idiot, and I knew him when he was a complete idiot. So just seeing the business that him and Imran have pulled together out of nothing, literally just out of their arse, that there was almost just moments of absolute pride sitting next to him, hearing his story. Daft things, mate, like, you know, left British Gas, sitting in Imran's outhouse, dialing local businesses, just getting after it. And, you know, he's grew that business to a point now where they're multi-award winning and just doing incredible. So that was a great episode for me personally. In the early days, I really enjoyed Ross Bryan's as well. He was probably the first guy that sat in front of us that was just like, I mean, his story ultimately was he took over a family business. There was a bit of politics, and you know that's tricky. But just a dead warming guy, like one of the guys that you really enjoy spending a bit of time with. And then couple kind of in the middle, really. Jamie Taylor, you know, for me equally was a big one, just because he's got such an inspirational story. Like, going for having the youth that he had, getting into bother, fighting, getting stabbed, you know, and then starting on roofing and leaving, starting his own business, just him and his brother and somebody else, and now running a multi-7-figure business with his own podcast. Sometimes you leave these conversations feeling properly inspired and really motivated. And then probably if I cast my mind back across the ones we've done in recent months, again, Michael Toner, I thoroughly enjoyed speaking to. Again, just because he's mega authentic, and his story's just quite inspiring. Do you know, like, and the hope is that people hear that are maybe at the same age that Michael was at when he got himself into a bit of bother and ended up in prison, and, you know, was brave enough to talk about the impact it had on his family and how he's been able to drag himself out of that position into now running a business that does a couple of million quid a year. It's just very, like, inspiring, motivating, and you leave the sessions like that with a bit of just a click in your step, thinking, right, you know, and I've changed a couple of things since we had Michael on the podcast. You know, he's helped inspire me to try and be a wee bit more authentic on social media, for example, and not just always sharing the highlight reel, talking about how difficult and challenging business can be. But God, there's been loads. There's been over 30 now, so you take wee nibbles and wee nuggets for each one that you've been to for different reasons.
Yeah, definitely. And when you think about, like, that I mentioned earlier, like, being enthusiastic about business, a lot of that comes for the type of people you've just mentioned, about hearing what they've went through. But also, there's been a couple of times, just to kind of round up talking about the guests, but think about the Monopoly Capital guys that we had on. We had Mike on, who's sort of business finance. If I think back to Barry before the podcast started, you ask me anything about mergers and acquisitions or business finance,
What does that mean?
I'd be like,
Aye.
I'm just a wee marketing guy, just leave me alone,
Aye.
you know. But the amount that we've learned in that journey, not through just having them on the podcast, but having that relationship where we can speak to them after it, ask for advice, you know, that's massive, you know.
And it's influencing what we're doing. Do you know,
Yeah,
like we've now agreed that part of our future growth strategy is acquiring other digital marketing agencies. I'll go on a limb and say that might have happened organically. It certainly wouldn't have happened at the pace that it's happened if we weren't sat in front of Jamie and Stephen, who are educating you without even realising on what is mergers and acquisitions and how do you make it work. So I mean we talk about influencers, but you know, and that word sometimes gets a bit of a dirty asterisk above it. But sometimes influencing is, you know, driven by literally just sitting as we do and having a blather about somebody's life and why they do what they do. Another key one for me, I think that's really kind of just popped into my head was Ajmal Mushtaq.
Yeah.
Just because locally, like, he's infamous in Lanarkshire. Do you know, like he owned a really kind of infamous restaurant, was recognised as a really, really impressive entrepreneur, multi-millionaire, exited his business, now started another business. He was another that reached out to us and said, can I come on your podcast? And I remember arriving in the studio that morning and thinking, I've actually been watching your stuff for years on social media, like, and now I'm getting an opportunity to sit down with you for an hour and have a blather about, you know, how you've been able to pull this off. So I definitely remember that as being a wee moment of gratitude almost, and thinking, right, we're doing quite well here, keep at it. But what I will say, you know, and I don't mind sharing in the interest, you know, what I've just said and trying to be a bit more authentic, there's categorically been periods throughout this year where I've thought, I can't keep doing this, I need to throw the towel in, or, you know, should we still be doing this? Because like any business owner that you know is trying to get an enterprise up and running and going, time is your most valuable commodity. And sometimes, especially when you're maybe not enjoying it as much, it's like anything else in life, you will categorically have periods where it becomes a bit of a chore and you think, oh, I need to get into the studio, record that, do all the shit afterwards to get it out there. There's times where you just can't be arsed, or you think, I could do without this because I'm mobbed, busy, trying to get things sorted for clients, personal life stuff. Again, it's like anything else in business or life. If you're going to do it, stick it out, you know, push yourself through the moments of thinking, God, I really can't be bothered. I remember I had maybe like a 2 or 3 week period when we were doing them weekly, where in my head I was constantly grappling with, do I really want to continue to do this? Do I want to continue to invest the time and money to keep this alive when I could be focusing that energy? You know, Jamie that was on the podcast spoke about energy tokens. You've only got 100 a day, so if I'm contributing 20, 30 of them in any given week to the podcast, it's just taking me away from growing my business. But having pushed through that and gotten out the other end and back into a position now where I'm really, really enjoying it, I'm so glad that I did, because I think sometimes when you're under the cosh like that, the benefits of it, you're blinded by it, you don't see it, you just see the task that's in front of you. And actually in my head when I was going, this is taking me away from growing my business, it's probably one of the things that's contributing to us growing the business.
Yeah, I think one thing that helped us, because we all had our wobbles with that, didn't we, where we were like, man, this is getting hard. It's probably, remember we had a chat where we were like, right, what are we enjoying about the podcast? And after speaking for a few minutes, we were like, aye, we're definitely not stopping.
Aye.
You know, so maybe if you're in that sort of recording cycle where it's week after week after week and you don't actually ever take time to sit and go, right, what's been great of late, what's been good, what's been challenging. So if you are in that, or starting a podcast or thinking to start about podcasts, always try and take stock at little points and just go, right, what am I enjoying? And that's how we made changes throughout the year. When you think about it, that's how we started not editing as much. That's how we started using software to speed things up. because we were always taking stock to say, right, are we still enjoying it? Yes. Right, how do we make it better? So maybe just because it's what we've seen this year, it's very easy to blink and next thing you know it's a year. Just try and take a breather now and again and think, right, how are we getting on with this? How's it working? What's doing well, what's not? So that I think that helped us. And I know categorically we would have really, really kicked ourselves if we stopped.
Aye.
So I'm really happy we pushed on.
Okay, it's like in with business as well. Like when you gear up on something, it never feels good.
Nah.
Do you know? It's like you only really fail at something if you gear in. So I definitely had some of that racking about my head as well. But I'm glad. Like I remember also us having a conversation like between the 3 years and going, look, the 3 years don't need to be on every episode.
Yeah.
See if you wake up on a Tuesday and think, I just can't be fucked with this today. I don't want to talk on camera, or I'm too busy. I've got, conflicting priorities. As long as there's a couple of us or even one of us that can rock up and host the episode, I think that helped alleviate some pressure as well, knowing that
definitely.
you didn't need to be here every single week and you could, to a certain extent, pick and choose. I've chosen to be here every week, I think. There was maybe one or two due to holidays that I've missed, but that's just because I've grown to enjoy it again.
Yeah.
And using the social clips as well, as content that you can repurpose is big, because every business owner, I know this, struggles on occasion with content. You sit at your desk and go, well, right, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
So knowing that you've got a bi-weekly episode of a couple of hours that comes with 15 to 30 clips, some will just be you talking, like me sitting talking into this mic now. It's not always about getting content from the guest. That's important, and that's the whole purpose of our podcast. But sometimes it's good knowing that I've got a wee bank of video content there that I can dip into for myself, for my own socials, to keep them alive.
Aye, that helps massively, and it's something I've not really taken full advantage of. I've just remembered vividly the closest I've been this year to quitting the podcast, right? And it was razor thin. I was nearly away. Was, sorry Ryan about reminding you about this, but when I had to phone Ryan 4 times in 10 minutes to book him into a slot, I booked him in the wrong date for 3 times, and then
I think that might have been my favourite moment of the year. So for context, we're sitting in the office and Barry booked a guest, and I think we were going somewhere. It might have been to
a conference.
We were at a conference, and so you phoned them and rearranged it, and then the second you came off the phone, you realised you had rearranged it into another date that we weren't available, and I just saw the life dripping out of your body, and of course, as a mate, found it funny rather than trying to support you.
So I had a brilliant support network at that time, because I was like, I can't believe I'm having to phone him back here. Walls were caving in. Looked over to Brian, who was pissing himself laughing in the corner. So there you go. It's good to have a support network. That was the closest I came. But it was funny as well, I suppose.
So what are you thinking, mate, in terms of future plans for the podcast? Having a think about next year, is it much of the same? Are you thinking we do some tweaks to try and keep it interesting and engaging?
So yeah, we're having a wee chat about this. I think for the future of the podcast, the number one thing we're going to do is continue. And we'll continue with that bi-weekly recording, so you'll get an episode every 2 weeks. And in the same light, we want to keep speaking to as many people that we can, really, just to keep learning from them. The other thing I think we're going to start to do is, obviously, if people are up for it, or past guests, is possibly change the format every so often to have a bit of a panel, so we'll get a panel in to talk about, growing your business through sales, or growing your business through marketing, or any sort of key topics that people are genuinely interested in. We can utilise either new guests or old guests and have a wee sit down around the table and probably get really specific on things that not only we think will help, but I suppose we'd ask the audience or anybody watching this, is there topics that you would like to know more of in business? And if there is, let us know, because we'll start to do these little panels and start to get a bit more granular. Again, it goes back to continuing, but also continuing to provide value, really, is the key things for us. For me, anyway. What do you think?
Aye, mate, I think much of the same, really. Get hopefully some fantastic guests booked in for 2025. So if you're listening or if you've seen any of it and you know you're local to Glasgow or to Scotland and have an interest in coming on, reach out to us on any of our social handles. You know, myself and Barry can be found pretty easily on LinkedIn in particular, so track us down, get yourself booked in, you know, hopefully continue all the great stuff that we've spoke about. Maybe do the odd pivot to just in the interest of making it, you know, a wee bit different and maybe a bit more engaging. And I just, if anything, have that in my head that it's here to stay. You know, it's a long-term play really, and you know, I don't want to cast out too much advice, but I think it is an important one, and it's probably not just relatable to podcasting, it's relatable to anything in business in particular, is that if you're going to commit to doing something, commit to doing something, stay disciplined, you know, push yourself through the periods where you think, I just can't be fucked doing this, I really need to just crack on. Because you only really fail if you give up, really, and you just get better and better with every episode that you churn out. So the humming and hawing and the you know, shit, we need to edit that and take that out, it all just disappears really after a couple of maybe not a couple of episodes for some, but you know, four or five max really. You find your rhythm. It's either you find your rhythm or you just go, I don't give a shit actually. If I made an arse of myself, like, I'll just put it out there, and if anything that provides a bit of a laugh for folk, a bit of ammunition for people to continue to call me a fat baldy bastard.
So you've just reminded me one of my favourite shorts this year. I don't know if you remember this. When you compared kitchen wrapping to salt and chili chicken. So I think your message about just not worrying too much about what you churn out there, that was a prime example of that.
Aye. And I think also, like, if I've learned anything, maybe not even necessarily across the year of us podcasting, but probably more over the last 2 or 3 years of me really absorbing a lot of podcasts, is that there's always a niche for somebody. You know, it's like, it doesn't need to be about business. If your interest is in cycling or cutting hair or kitchen rattle or salt and chili, somebody will listen to it, do you know? So just, if you've got an interest in it and you're passionate about it, chances are other people are too. So just be brave, put yourself out there, get one going. I was got to say, if we can help with anything, then reach out. Maybe reach out to Barry. I'm not the guy to reach out to. I'm good at turning up and talking, and that's about it. But so I think I'm starting to digress. But the question was future plans. Yeah. More of the same. Couple of different me sessions just to mix things up a bit and just keep them at it really and continuing to enjoy it. I think the minute I really have a prolonged period in not enjoying it, that is when I'd probably look to pull the lever and go, what's the point? You know, I'm not enjoying doing it, so I'm not going to invest my time, money and energy into it. But I'm certainly nowhere near that now. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Good.
And then I think the last thing I wanted to cover off, we've touched on it on a few occasions throughout the podcast today, mate, and I definitely know that we're aligned on this one, as is Andy, but just one final nod and thank you to the studio. Cam, I know you're behind the curtain listening intently, but I just can't
I don't know if he listens intently to us anymore,
or if he's even behind the curtain, if I'm honest. But just a massive thank you to you and Mark for all the help and support, being as responsive as you are. It's just been it's honestly, I can right, I'm going to start this again because I'm stuttering all over the place, right?
No edits.
No edits. We've already agreed, right? But I can honestly say that we would never have made it to episode 21 if it wasn't for the help and support of you and Mark. So just a massive thanks, mate. Really looking forward to continuing to working with you next year. And just hopefully much of the same in 2025.
Aye, definitely. I'll just add my wee piece in there as well. I agree with everything, and I think the reason we probably enjoy and have a bit of fun is we have a bit of laugh with the guys in the studio as well. So puts you at ease and they keep us right, which can be hard sometimes, keeping us too right. But and Andy, but Aye, thanks very much, guys. Yous have been brilliant.
And then I guess the final thank you needs to go out to kind of all the guests that have agreed to come on to the podcast and those that have tuned in.
Yeah.
Literally, podcast would be nothing. It wouldn't exist without people agreeing to come on and sit down and have a blather with us. So a massive thank you to all those that have been on the podcast in 2024. And an even bigger thank you to all of the people within our own network and our guest networks that have tuned into the podcast, shared, liked, engaged with our content in some way, shape or form. That's ultimately why we do it. So just a thank you, and we would welcome your continued support into 2025.
Yep, definitely. And don't be shy to reach out and give us ideas and comments. And I know we were talking about getting trolled earlier, but I'm even going to ask for feedback. You know, like we would like to probably objective of ours next year is maybe just to engage with everybody a little bit more, and let us know what you would want on future episodes, and thanks very much for everything so far.
Don't call me a fat baldy bastard, please.
Just call me one, it's fine.
You're right, I think we'll wrap up there. Cheers everybody, and we'll see you in 2025 for more episodes of the Risking It All podcast.